As a kid, I loved The Fairly OddParents. It was this great show about how a depressed kid found happiness with godparents that actually understand him and grant him any wish at his command. It's satisfying to see what would happen if a kid could use his imagination to create a world that was perfect for him. It had great writing, not only with the comedy, but with how they make the episodes interesting, by raising the stakes whenever they're given an opportunity. The vocal songs also have a ton of personality. Whenever I hear Shiny Teeth in Me and Icky Vicky, a wave of nostalgia hits me every time. Fairly OddParents knew exactly what it wanted to be and executed it to perfection. But then something happened. Poor decisions made the show decline in quality. The series suffered an epic collapse, like something I've never seen before from a classic cartoon. It pains me to talk negatively about this show because it brought so many great memories to my childhood. But I think it serves as a great example of what not to do with a show this iconic. So without further ado, let's find out who is responsible for the death of the Fairly OddParents. Anybody remember A Fairly Odd Movie starring Drake Bell of all people as Timmy Turner, because that's how low the budget was for this project? I'm not gonna lie, I was never a fan of the live action direction they went for. But the real reason this movie sucks isn't because it's live action, but because the script is abysmal. A 23-year-old Timmy Turner still in the 5th grade? Is this supposed to be a joke? I feel more creeped out by the main character than I feel sorry for him. It's a shame because, man, this really could have been an appropriate series finale if done right. Have it take place in high school with a 17-year-old Timmy Turner, and let us follow how he tries to cope with the inevitable loss of his godparents. But have it end on this bittersweet note that, while he does lose Cosmo and Wanda, he still has a bright future ahead of him, and he learns that he no longer needs fairies to be happy. It could have ended with this great message that sometimes you need to let go in order to move on with your life. But instead, nope. That's too emotionally challenging for kids apparently. So let's instead make Cosmo and Wanda these clingy characters that don't give a crap about Timmy's future. Or let's make a new last minute rule that if you're like Timmy, you can keep your fairies forever. And I think that's the main problem with A Fairly Odd Movie. It has no identity, no purpose for existing, but it had a ton of potential. By the way, they made 2 more live action movies after this one. Why? I have no idea, but it's worth mentioning. The thing is, it's easy to pretend this catastrophe never happened, considering it's live action and all. So I guess we can assume it takes place in an alternate universe or something. I wouldn't point too much of the blame towards this movie, I just thought it was worth mentioning. Poof was a new character they introduced in a 1-hour special titled Fairly Odd Baby. I kinda like Poof, to be honest. He's the only new character in the later seasons of the show that doesn't feel forced in any way. Even if you don't like Poof, he doesn't really change the show that much if you really think about it, considering he's a literal fairy baby. But on the other hand, that's my only nitpick. There's only so much you can do with this type of character. So in some episodes, specifically the ones where he's not the focus, he's just there. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't do anything, but at the same time, I guess that's a good thing. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's not a problem. It doesn't bother me, but with more of the episodes you watch from season 8 onwards, you start to notice this. Sparky the dog. I think Sparky was the beginning of the end. Why do you need a fairy dog? Who thought this was a good idea? Actually, you know what? I know exactly who approved this, but we'll get into that later. This is a prime example of a show trying way too hard to stay relevant. I get that they wanted to try new things, but they could have at least did it in a way that doesn't feel so pathetically forced. Like, what is this, Johnny Test? This was the last straw, the final nail in the coffin. At this point, Fairly OddParents had been going on for 9 seasons, so I guess they felt like it was time to add an interesting twist to the show so that things wouldn't get stale. I get it, but man, at least do it in a way that doesn't seem like the biggest middle finger to your longtime fans. I don't think Chloe was a bad idea. She could have worked for 1 episode, but then have her be a side character from then on out. But nope. Instead, let's make her a main character, change the theme song, and completely rewrite the entire concept behind the show to fit her in. I remember when this character was first announced and how much backlash the show got for this decision. It was not pretty, let me tell you. And believe it or not, it gets even worse. They later made the transition from traditional animation to Flash animation, and wow. This show was on its deathbed at this point. I honestly believe this is what did it. If it wasn't Poof or Sparky, Chloe is what killed the Fairly OddParents. There was no coming back from this. And apparently, if we wanted to point fingers, the executives at Nickelodeon were the ones responsible for this decision. And perhaps even other decisions such as Sparky or even Poof. And it just goes to show how money hungry and irresponsible this company can be sometimes. The Fairly OddParents was canceled on July 26, 2017. 2 years have passed since, and since then, they re-uploaded most of the old episodes on YouTube. That being said, I'm glad people today get to witness this show when it was at its best. That's one way to make up for all the money-hungry decisions. And here's what's so frustrating. I see the glimpse of a competent episode from time to time in the later seasons, but these forced additions completely ruin any decent writing the show had left. And okay, it was an attempt at saving a dying audience, but that raises the question, if you saw your ratings going down, why not just end the show? Make an epic series finale instead of risking the image of how people remember the Fairly OddParents. Instead, they continued to air new episodes until it finally burnt out. And that's honestly inexcusable because there were so many opportunities where they could have just wrapped it up. Channel Chasers, Wishology, Fairly Odd Movie even. Unlike shows such as Ed, and Eddie that understood their time was coming to an end, so they completed their stories the best they could, the Fairly OddParents simply refused to stop. And as a result, it ended on a bad note. And that makes me sad.